This is a series of fights between Ace and Edward, but it was a slightly different kind of setup. This was actually a request from Ace to compare his fighting style as he fights with a single short, a sword and dagger, and sword and deathstick. Although I think deathstick goes before dagger. Anyways, so essentially, we're trying to analyze a consistency in approach for Ace between the different weapon styles. And of course, when it comes down to this kind of study, fighting with different weapons and fighting against even different opponents, there is an expectation that you will fight slightly differently, even drastically differently in some cases. And so we are going to see differences, but we're going to try to highlight what those are, where they come in, perhaps why along the way. I know, long story, but this is just going to be we're going to be looking a lot more deeply at fundamental elements of what Ace is doing rather than nitpicking kind of the actual action within the fight. So let's kind of start, and you'll kind of see what I mean. So let's just take a second to start things off, and we're going to get some baseline data. What I and I think having what you do with the single sword gives you kind of that baseline. So the first thing we're going to look at is we're going to look at stance. I think some of the other things we'll look at is kind of placement and positioning for the sword. We're going to be looking at kind of average, standard, kind of the consistent attacks, and maybe some reactions to certain things. So that's kind of where I'm going to be focusing on. So starting out with the single sword, like just as we start, what we're seeing originally is this stance here is slightly wider. We can tell because one, the back leg is a lot more extended, and this leg has a lot more of an angle to it. We see a similar look with Edward, although it's not as pronounced, most likely just because of the attack in motion right now. Um, but Ace actually did study under Edward for a while, so it can logically be connected that they would have similar stances. But this is the first fight. This is the first data point. So just to compare, we're going to watch to see how his stance either tightens up or spreads out. We're seeing that Ace has his sword kind of extended. We're going to see if that remains the same. It's also known that Ace has more of a parallel sword to the ground versus something more angled like Edward's. I know that was off. That was like offhand up here. And we're going to see probably that Ace's strikes more often go for the torso than anything else. Okay. Let's just slow that down for half a second and watch it again. Lots of tip work with Ace. The strikes are more of a lean than a step. It was a little step, but then it comes into the lean as the predominant. The retreat is a lean, very wide stance right there. A slip step through, but still roughly towards the torso. Okay. We've got this slightly slowed down a little bit. There's a lean. Still the wide stance. Okay, let's just backtrack, just kind of watch through it again. Okay. Okay. He has brought his sword up, so he might be able to. But he is addressing there. Okay. So one thing that, again, another data point that I can kind of call out is if we watch Ace's sword compared to say something like Edward's. Edward has a lot more kind of hinging action going on with where his approach to different things are, whereas Ace, he comes from here, he slips all the way back, and he's pulling his sword all the way along with it, and he's again going for that solid all the way here for another full, like, to be completely honest, like how close everybody is, like the idea of going from this refused stance, right, to this full blown almost Fletcher lunge out here with how close they are, like that's kind of excessive to a degree. Edward catches it, right, but Ace has pulled back and gone in for again another really solid, fast, straight shot. Still the wide stance. A lot of these, he's doing a lot of these slip steps. I think it's a draw. Big lunge. Okay. Now we've moved to Dagger. So, yeah, in just a few fights, and again, it's hard to distill a fencer's style in just a few fights. Like the reality is the time of day, how tired everybody is, who you're fighting, what you're fighting with, the terrain, just what's been going on through your mind. Like it can drastically change things. Um, so you need to take this with a grain of salt. But from what I've seen so far with Ace, is when fighting with a single sword, he's got a much wider stance. He uses a lot more slip steps and very strong lunges in a very straightforward strikes. I did not see a lot of block attack combos. I did not see a lot of hinging. Yes, point control and point work is happening there, but Ace is relying on very strong strikes to kind of blow past someone's defenses or speed and timing. Um, which is fine. And then he's using his leaning back and forth um, to kind of defend against. What I'm also seeing is that at least when fighting against Edward, I saw Edward's blade around Ace a lot, especially the point. Um, there's a lot of times where um, that can be, what am I trying to say here? Like there's at times where I'm seeing that when Ace is fighting with a single sword, the opponent's tip is around their body a lot, and so there may be shots that are being missed. There may be shots that look like it. There may be places where the defense is not gonna get, is there, people are getting past Ace's defense at times, more often than they think is kind of we realize, and so there is overall an emphasis on offense when Ace is fighting with a single sword. So now let's move on to sword and Deathstick for Ace. All right, so assessing again, we are seeing a consistency with that wider stance. There's still a bit of a lean forward to lean into it. We're in a refused stance, which means the predominant weapon over here with the sword is in the left hand and aligned with the back foot, and then you've got the offhand forward with the death stick. Okay. Okay. Let's see if we noticed with that particular strike. Again, we're seeing these really strong lunges. We're seeing a little bit of rolling the ankle. We're seeing this Deathstick try to take the blade, and we're seeing the strike come in, but we're not seeing the twist that normally comes out. So the range is limited when in that refuse stance. And then it comes back to here. All right. So you can see there, that's kind of what I talked about. Like the tip of Edward's sword is getting past a lot of Ace's defense, and it's ending up over here. Like if you're not careful, like you can be watching this and be like, that was a hit on Ace, right? But in this case, it was a Deathstick. But like, so we see this strike. Like this strike is already right here as Ace makes contact. So again, we didn't see a lot of twisting. The Deathstick stayed the predominant thing. Yeah. Again, another really strong strike. A full blown like lunge, trying to bypass any kind of defense with speed and just explosive energy. Okay, and then he's using his Deathstick. He's using his Deathstick to essentially just lock in the blade, and then because he didn't twist, he can pull his sword out and then just kind of reach in and strike. But that was a full-on, lunge along the way. Okay. So look again, very wide stance. Leans back with a little half step, but not full retreat. Okay. And then we're getting this. Okay. I see like this. Here's a step that's coming in. We've got a full thing. We are in very sorry. I'm just getting really excessive with these. Very tight quarters here. Okay, the sword is already at Edward's. Essentially bypassed his head. He's at his shoulder. Right. It hasn't quite made contact yet because of it didn't go tip in. But one thing I am concerned about, we still have here, um, and I know Edward is retreating, but like we ended up with like a full on slip step lunge. So I don't. I think there's wasted energy on Ace's part for having that full commitment in that motion, where his arm could be doing the work. Um, to get the strikes in without that full explosive lunge to get in, right? Okay, we've switched now to a standard stance where the front foot is lined up with the sword. The Deathstick is back. Little strikes. Nothing really excessive. There's the back to refuse and the slip step through. Okay, wide stance. When Ace wants to strike, so far every time that we've kind of seen that is he's got this big wide stance, and he's stepping through, at least with the Deathstick, he's stepping through to get this very explosive, almost a punch through the opponent's defenses. So um, the fighting style is different, I will say, between with the Deathstick. I think in both cases, like the attack style is the same, meaning that Ace relies a lot on these really explosive attacks to get through the opponent's defenses. Um, but with the Deathstick in particular, you can tell that he's relying on his Deathstick to essentially lock up their opponent's sword with how large it is, with um, how much mass is there. Uh, if he does get control of the blade, it's really tough to get around. And then you add on top of it, if he takes your sword, it's going to be immediately followed by this explosive like press in. So you don't have time to retreat. You don't have time to pull your sword away. You don't have time to kind of re-engage. Like he's coming in with that follow up shot. We're still not seeing a lot of block attack combos. We're not seeing a lot of the standard 8 blocks with Ace. He's still very much reliant on pure offense in a lot of ways to win these fights. He's got good positioning, like we're gonna hopefully see with the Dagger and the Deathstick. Like he's got good positioning to defend himself, but most of his kills are coming from that we've reset, we're having a little bit of a conversation, and then bam, punch in. Okay, reset. Bam, punch in. There's not this block, 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 attack, attack, block, 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 attack, attack. It's if someone does make it past the explosive strike, it's we're in close, and now we're gonna finagle around in this kind of brawly repositioning, and we're gonna try to finagle our way in. So let's look at how the dagger is being used. We are in refused again, slightly less thing, but we're seeing a lot of these little mid strikes, just like poking at your opponent, but they always end up right here, so they're not really doing anything. But at this point, I can almost guarantee that what he's doing, he's just probing, but essentially just like moving the positioning of your opponent until he sees a moment. And without before we play this, I'm gonna bet that we're gonna see a moment where it turn essentially this goes down and he's just gonna punch. Okay, well Edgar got that one. So there's a punch. Same thing. Okay. This goes down. It actually went up, so sorry I went wrong. But he took Edwards. He's trying to take Edwards' blade, and he's going in for this slip step, full blown punch to get through. And you can see like he gets the kill through an explosive start, and by taking control of Edwards' blade. Little probing strike, punch, punch. Taking control of Edward's blade with the dagger, and then punch, punch. Multiple attacks. Sword forward, little probing, get the dagger in. Okay, so this is a sign that to me, based off what we've seen so far, he's slip step, and he's prepping himself for this big explosive strike. Oh, and he's back. And once again, it's take control of the blade and then get in close, and then with the sword or the dagger, kind of finagle the way in. Like so, yeah. In all of these so far, consistently, we're seeing that either one, Ace gets a kill because he has an explosive strike that bypasses the block, or two, he takes control of the blade, locks it down, and then has a free shot essentially to get the kill afterwards. So yeah, we're here. take control, he's reaching out with the dagger, freeze the sword, strike. So that was the kind of the end of it. And so in summary, like with the dagger, he's using it in a similar way as the Deathstick. It's just smaller, and it has offensive potential. So he's more willing to kind of use his sword to take control of someone's blade, and then relies on that dagger. But consistency wise, I don't think that they're drastically different overall. There's small differences, but summarizing Ace's style based off these three kind of sets of fights would be very wide stance, a reliance on explosive lunges, heavy use of slip step, heavy use of like strong punches with followed up with a few multiple attacks. Um, I'm seeing this a reliance on taking control of the opponent's blade and locking them up in combination with moving into close range. Um, and we're seeing that a lot of the shots are coming down from low, and coming up into the torso, in a lot of ways. So to me, those are kind of be my assessment, and those would be like the defining features of Ace's style.